All righty, welcome to Real Talk AI and Cyber Now. I'm your host, as always, Mr. Ron Hicks with Valentia, and with me today, very special guest, Mr. Mark Porter with Vigil Agent. What's going on, Mark?
Hey, how you doing, Ron? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm good, man. Friday vibes around here, ready for the weekend. How about you?
Likewise, I got the house all to myself this weekend, so get a little college football
Nice. There you go. Get some football in.
in. Yep, for sure.
Well, listen, we've been talking for the last several weeks on this show specifically about AI and how it's used in cybersecurity. And I know you guys over at Visual Agent are very much right in the mix on that specific thing. So today I want to focus on it. Mark, bring us what you got. We talked a little bit last week about Visual Agent, specifically how it fit within a business context, a little bit about AI, a little bit about XDR, a little bit about getting everything in one place. But I'm really looking forward to hearing what you got for us today.
Cool. Well, I'm going to share my screen, and we will see how this works here. Give me just a second. I'm excited to talk about how we're leveraging AI with partners like yourselves to really level the playing field, if you will, with the attackers that are out there. Because what's happening now is the likes of some we've just never seen anything like it. And as we as we go forward, the only way that we're going to be able to combat the kinds of attacks that we're seeing is through leveraging artificial intelligence. And everybody talks about artificial intelligence and all that. There's a lot of different ways in which it can be used. And what we're focused on is really in the agentic realm, solving for what we think is probably one of the most significant challenges, which is humans, right? There's just not enough of them. It's hard to train. The bulk of any security operations center relies on level one analysts. They do a tremendous amount of work. That's the way we've been doing it for years and years and years. 90+% of what you see, probably north of 95% of what you see, is what everybody talks about as false positives. We hate that term. There really is no such thing. It's an anomaly, right? It's whether it's malicious or benign. The issue now is, we live in this world where we have to be right 100% of the time, and the attackers only have to be right once. And that's not really a level playing field. And we're seeing incidents where very normalized traffic with legitimate tools are being used for malicious purposes. And when you say you have humans in your business that make mistakes and cough up their credentials, and then somebody's using their device that's been normalized on a network, how do you know that that traffic is not legitimate? And it's really hard. So we've been focusing on a couple of key concepts. Our own agentic AI solution helps us cut through the noise quickly. And we've recently partnered with Elastic to build out a very, very complex, we call it beyond, really moving beyond XDR, beyond SIM, beyond EDR, the concept of observability. So when you marry these two things together, what it really does is observability takes out the white space between the tools. It brings the tools together, fills those cracks, and allows you to see what's in them. And that's really, really critical, because what the attackers are now doing is they're doing what's called living off the land. That's that concept of using your tools that already exist, not introducing new things in the market because they've used it into the environment, because they've used AI to train it on the tools that we use to defend. So they know exactly what's going to happen, or they can probe a device, see what the response is, and then respond again differently, right? They can change that attack. They can do that in seconds, right? And that's not human. That's not what we're seeing. So by eliminating the noise and eliminating the workload and being able to respond at machine speed, it gets really, really exciting and really interesting. By having ways to control the data, which I'll go through in a minute, it becomes a level playing field because we're now able to correlate faster. And ultimately, where we want to be is looking ahead, right? Because everybody today is hamstrung by detect and respond. Well, by the very nature of this business, something has already happened. And by the time I see it, it's at least a few seconds, could be a few minutes, right? Depending on what's going on. In 20 minutes, you lose a network. That's the sad facts. The good news is that we're not seeing the traditional sort of smash and grab, drop ransomware and go. The bad news is it's getting harder to find. So how do you find them? You've got to be able to be really focused on getting to mean time to conclusion. If we look at all the low value alerts, it takes an analyst anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes to go through and confirm that it's not malicious. Most of that time is spent gathering information, gathering context. I can now do that in under a minute. I can do it in about 30 to 40 seconds. I can do it with a virtual agent that can comb through massive amounts of context, way more than a human ever would. Advises, today we do it as human in the loop. It advises our humans what it's looked at, what it's seen. It actually shows its work so they can validate all of it. And it gives it a percentage weighted conclusion. So what's happening, so we've really seen a transformation in just 7 weeks in production with this. What we've seen is a transformation where we get rid of those low level alerts in a minute or less, and we're spending inordinate amounts of time on mid things, things that are very, very normal looking, but they've tripped a trigger for some reason. So if it's tripped a trigger in one of the tools for some reason, we want to be sure of where it's at. Now, the best testimony I can give is actually one of the customers we serve for you guys. Before we showed them this, in the lead up to it, he was tickled to death that the number of alerts, the number of tickets that he saw had dropped dramatically month to month. And there was no explanation why yet, right? And when we were talking to him, I said, I can show you exactly what's going on in your environment. So he's looking at far less because we're far more sure of what we need him to look at and getting to that conclusion quickly. Now that conclusion could be this is totally benign, no worries, get rid of it. It could be that it needs further investigation by partners such as yourself or the end customer because certain things only they could know. Was this person really traveling, or is this really normalized traffic? Do you expect this kind of behavior on your network? Maybe, maybe not, right? So,
Mark, it sounds like that we've got a situation where AI is finally really empowering the promise of XDR to come alive. We've always had that in the past, but like you said, those white spaces between the tools and just, getting alerts from third-party providers that are, hey, just a link to a portal type thing, the challenges. It sounds like you guys have really addressed the challenges directly, and the game is the same, maybe a little harder, changed a little bit, like you were mentioning, normal things that are used nefariously. We see that a lot with business email compromise, right? Somebody's credentials
yep.
in there, and the traffic looks normal, but it's totally nefarious. It sounds like finally the promise of XDR is being delivered with the empowerment of AI actually being able to reach the data.
Yeah, and there's a couple more advances that are coming that I think take us beyond XDR, right? Because what XDR started, and if you look at where we're at, we've kind of been through the hype cycle and everybody's talked about it. At the end of the day, a lot of the basic functionality is still SIM, right? We're still counting on sort of old school SIM. The thing about XDR was that it allowed us to take more and more disparate types of data, right? With the promise of correlation. And it does to a degree, but it still requires outside systems. So a lot of what we had to build to accommodate for that was in our orchestration and automation capabilities. And that's a massive investment. I mean, it's a massive investment in just the platform cost, all of those pieces, but then in time and dev work, because SOAR is another thing that without it, none of us could compete leading up to today, right? Going forward, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because with agentic AI and what I'm about to show you next, we can ultimately take far more action dynamically, because agentic AI is really is really game changing, right? So When I lay out conceptually, if you look at the image that we're sharing here, with our OmniViz solution, that concept at the top is the data plane. That's where all the tools sit. I can now take that data, and I'm no longer hamstrung by what an XDR platform wants to do with it or how it wants to receive it. I can take that data and I can format it in a uniform way, because while SIM normalizes logs, it doesn't mean it normalizes and interprets them, right? It doesn't mean that it formats them exactly the same. XDR is pulling them all in and, as your customer so eloquently said, throwing all our logs in a pile, right? That's kind of how it works. But by throwing them in an orderly pile that's uniform in the way that we manage it from start to finish, from beginning to end, I now have a data lake that is far more manageable, far more versatile, faster, far more capable of recognizing trends. And most importantly, as I build out my suite of virtual agents, I can leverage this data to get prescriptive and to get ahead. I'm eliminating the white noise on the detect and respond. But imagine a world where a virtual agent is out combing the internet for trends, for chatter, right? Like an intel agent, if you will, combing the dark web, combing 4chan, combing forums where hackers lurk and hang out and share secrets. And they do. They do this openly on the dark web. So now I can see what they're doing in real time, constantly, right? Every conversation. You give them the context, you give the virtual agents the context to understand and interpret it, and to look within our data lake for those trends. So now I can say, Ron, you know what? We've got a customer of yours. We're seeing they're in a sector that is really heavily being attacked. Palo Alto, attacks on Palo Alto firewalls picked up like 180% or something overnight, some crazy number. Scans. Well, those scans are a precursor to an exploit coming, right? There's clearly a known vulnerability out there. So now I look and say, okay, Ron, you got a bunch of Palos out there. We got to go figure out how to make sure that we put extra watch on those things. We got to figure out how to automate blocking that we weren't doing before from this region, because these are where these attacks are happening. We got to look for IP address, multiple IP addresses, thousands of IP addresses changing quickly. Those are signs of an attack, right? Different things that are going on out there. We're looking ahead. We identify, because we've now got that data in a lake that's mineable, usable, and all that. And now I've got an AI agent that knows what the appropriate actions are when things are happening. I've got a I hate to call it XDR, but we've now got a system that takes all that XDR, all that SIM functionality, all of those capabilities. It can go reach out and take actions natively instead of through a SOAR platform, dynamically with a virtual agent who can actually read what the tool set tells them. This is the process for this type of alert, right? So I can bound the AI, which is really important. I need to keep it within a box. I need to keep it focused on what it has to do. And I can provide safeguards to my client. And we talk about sort of the risk of harm calculus, right? The actions that I can take are virtually unlimited. The question is, should I, right? Do I want to do something that could take down your entire firewall? The risk of harm is great to your business that way. Do I want to do something that, if I'm not 100% certain, to freeze a Microsoft account? Yeah, that's a low risk, right? If I want to freeze it for 2 minutes while we sort out the action, absolutely. You might say, if you get above 50 or 60% confidence on that, I want you to stop it until you're 100% and then unlock it, right? Or keep it locked, because the risk of losing your entire Microsoft environment is high, right? If they start working their way in. So we've got the opportunity to get ourselves into a world where we can see everything in a common interface, where I've got native logging from all of your sources. I can present all that data. Most importantly, frankly, ideally, in a perfect world, nothing happens, right? And biggest challenge we have when nothing happens is the customer says, "Why am I paying you $10,000 a month for that?" Right? In the meantime, we're busting our humps to keep them safe, right? We're handling 400 tickets a month, or God knows what. But now I can show that all to them to a much higher degree so that they can be certain of the one thing that keeps everybody up at night, which is, how do I know we're not missing something? And that's critical.
Agreed, Mark.
So I think, from our perspective, I'm going to share just a little more on that concept. Um, it is critical, and we're seeing EDR evasion as a reality, right? And this is probably the scariest thing for most of our managed service provider partners, and I don't know how much they're talking about it to end users and how much people are thinking about it. But we really think, and I shared this with you very directly. I said we've got to do things differently. And when I say we, that's not just us at VigilAigent. That's us. That's you. That's the industry, right? Like, that's our customers. They got to change the way they're thinking, because a reliance on any individual tool is absolutely the devil's errand. And we see that with EDR a lot. I think people have changed their mind on business email compromise protection and are really leaning in on that. And I'm ecstatic to see that, because that's a massive surface. We do so much by email, and it is so easy. As long as you have human beings, they're gonna get fooled. I'm actually a proponent of end user education, but sadly, the statistical data that's coming out isn't necessarily proving out that just education alone is enough. In fact, it's saying very clearly it's not, because the education doesn't make as much of an impact as testing them. Testing them is huge. All of these things we can do are great, but we're seeing this bifurcation of tools where they're just saying, oh, I got this guy doing that, or my guys do this, or, I got CrowdStrike and I'll manage it myself. Well, that's great, but it only sends me events. It doesn't send me logs. It doesn't marry it to the network telemetry, because it's only looking at endpoints. It's not telling me what's going on in the SaaS environment either, right? So got all these
Right.
things. How do we marry them together? And what we're able to do now is bring all of that together with unified agents for physical infrastructure, agentless and some of the cloud structures. But you got to cover the SaaS, all your SaaS applications. I mean, a typical organization has between 4 and 20 SaaS applications that they're using, depending on the size of the organization. I've got to have visibility in that SaaS. I got to have visibility into whatever virtual infrastructure you have. Customers say, well, I only have 365. And then you look in there and there's 5 servers in an Azure environment. Well, that's not Microsoft 365. You got to treat those, really tight. And by the way, don't name them my IP server. Don't give away what's on them. Don't make it any easier than it has to be. But you got to have visibility in that. You got to have visibility into whatever physical infrastructure, and you got to have visibility into whatever connectivity they're using. Hopefully, they're using SASE instead of VPNs these days. I mean, if that's an educational process for some customers. But when we start talking about observability, it's about having access to all those. It's about having the ability now, for the first time ever, to see not just that data is flowing from these sources. We can look at your environment and we can say, I've got 22 different connectors into Ron's customer, and all of them are up. That's good. But now I can actually look and see the quality of the data. Am I getting all the fields I want? Am I getting all those things? Because just piping data in doesn't help if it's not correct, right? If it's not formatted properly, and if it's not giving us the value that we need. So now I'm in a situation where I can do all that. I know that they're working, and I know that they're working well or not. And I can go in and I can see. We've got to think about this differently. And I think you and I have talked about this. I've had a lot of conversations with customers about reliance on insurance and what happens. And what's interesting is it is finally like a light bulb moment. We assume things as industry professionals. We assume things are known that our customers don't ultimately fully understand. And I'm going to tell you just a quick nightmare of one of our customers. He actually spoke at an event on behalf of one of our partners about the worst day of his professional career, which He actually was a first responder in 9/11. That was pretty bad. He owns a business and he was breached, and it almost cost him his home, his business, everything. And he was talking about that, and I said, I made a comment, and I sort of probably tempted fate or karma or whatever. I said, and then, fortunately, you didn't lose your insurance. The next day, he lost his insurance. He got a non-renewal notice. And this was the dot that finally connected for his partner and finally made me realize that people don't understand what happens when they're not doing this right and they get breached. And by the way, you could do everything right and still get breached, right? But if you do everything right and you still get breached, you're going to be on much better footing when to handle the fallout. You're going to be capable of responding, and you're going to be able to say to your customers, your employees, your insurance carrier, I did everything right. I had all these services in place. Because if you don't have all those things in place and you had insurance, if they pay the claim, they're going to look to subrogate. They're going to look to sue everybody else involved in your network support and all that. And then they're going to non-renew you when your renewal comes up. And when they non-renew you,
Mark,
you won't get another carrier.
Mark, that you bring up a really good point, and I think one of the main reasons that we started Valenture back in 2018 was this idea of companies relying on insurance, buying a product, normally EDR, as you mentioned,
Yep.
and moving on. And what kept happening was the product, of course, wasn't all that was promised. No one product ever will be, right? We talk about defense in depth a lot and, around that. But either the insurance didn't pay because they didn't look at the fine print and they didn't really realize that, that paperwork is built to not pay. That's what the insurance companies do, right? I mean, let's
Yep.
be real. And even if it does work in your favor and they do actually give you money, which is really hard to get there, you're gone after that. You're not,
Yep.
you're not insurable. And a lot of times people don't realize that whenever you're not insurable, or you can't or you can't say yes to some third party audits that clients are requiring of their vendors and so forth, you can't do business. So many times we see the security being driven very much from an insurance requirement or a third party audit
Yep.
requirement or from these different requirements, rather than an actual recognition that this business is your baby. This business is your legacy. This business is a real thing that does need to be protected. And like we say around here all the time, a lot of times your security is only good as your configs, and it's the reality of the world, how your firewall is configured, how your EDR is set up and configured, how that device that's on it is configured, how that SaaS is configured, how these things are actually rolled out and configured so many times actually is directly responsible
For
for the
sure.
difficulty of how a hacker can or cannot move in an environment.
That's a big deal, and it's one of the challenges that we're seeing because we're not managing the internal environment. When you get into enterprise, when you get into larger companies, they're typically fully capable of managing their own. They might have some consultants. They might have this guy doing a piece and this guy doing a piece. In mid-market, it gets a little more consolidated where they usually have a single provider or their own internal staff, right? But either way, for us as a security provider, what's super challenging is they start making changes, right? It's dynamic.
Yes.
It's never the same, right? They're going to continue to roll out. They add users. They do this. They do that. Well, when they make a change, the attack surface has changed, right? And so now it's a real big part of, all this technology is great, and all the advances AI makes for us operationally, phenomenal. Huge leap forward for us, scalability, cost, all those things. Well, we're focused on passing that cost back to our partners and our customers to try to make this more affordable because part of that's just mission driven, right? More importantly, what we're doing is I'm not looking to get rid of people. I want to take those people and I want to have them doing high value things, right? And one of those high value things is we've had to now turn ourselves around and poke at the customers, right? We are now scanning the external. We're doing external vulnerability testing. We're doing dark web scanning. We're looking for leaks. We're looking for cracks. We're looking for ways in. This, makes a lot of common sense. If you can keep them out, it's a hell of a lot easier, right? There's a lot of ways in,
Absolutely.
right? If we're testing them through the email testing, we're testing the users, we're constantly phishing them and seeing, we're at least identifying vulnerable users and hopefully making them more aware of what's going on. But if we
Yes.
can just keep poking at that exterior, at least it helps us. We've found things that customers added, changed, did whatever, like resegmented a network, done all these things, where all of a sudden we were sort of shut off.
Yep.
We were blind, right? So we know now that we need to proactively test on behalf, and that's baked into the solution and baked into the really not, I shouldn't say the solution, that's baked into the service side of the solution
Yeah.
because we can no longer rely on reactive. With AI, I think everybody knows Robert Herjavec from Shark Tank. They may or may not know that Herjavec he's a cybersecurity legend, right? He built I think the largest in Canada, and now they combined with a U.S. company. They're massive. I saw a video that he put out the other day, genuinely alarmed about what's going on out there and how you need to be thinking about it. We haven't even touched on. I just spent 3 days with my dev team. We haven't even touched on what's going on. I want you to think about this. How many of your customers' people are using Chat GPT on a day in, day out basis and leaking information on the company? They're giving it away,
Huge.
giving it
Huge.
away,
Shadow AI is a
right?
big problem.
Well,
Absolutely.
yeah. What's the governance plan around it? How do you monitor it, right? Like it's a
Yes.
complex thing to monitor. But they're putting company data out there and they're not even using, we're not even talking about paid versions. We're talking about,
Right.
people using free versions. How
Right.
many how many companies are using it to write documents for HR and contracts and
Right.
things like that? Because look, let's face it, it's convenient. But how do you manage it? How do you monitor it? Those are some new frontiers because once you start willingly giving away the keys to the kingdom, that's where this gets really, really hard to start telling what's going on. So those are things that we're thinking about. Those are things we're looking forward to, and
Mark,
everybody's got to.
we're actively involved in those areas. Specifically, one of the main things that is a driver right now for secure AI adoption is the fact that your people are bringing it to work. So AI is being used at work. It's just
Yeah,
whose AI is being used at work. So the question of whether people are using AI is we're well past that. It's today's technology. People are using it. Deal with it. It's just the way it is now. As a
yep,
business, it's real simple. You need to be a leader. That's part of being, of being a business, right? That brings on employees and so forth. So as a leader, there's an AI use policy that absolutely needs to be set. I mean, how do you want it used? What's right? What's wrong? But then there's the technology behind that, like just simply looking at what AI is being used on your network, securing that so that those
yep,
public AI tools are not allowed on your network, and then proactively providing your users with a secure AI platform that does enable them to do the job, and getting behind that and pushing that as a good thing. All of those things are, I think, what we're seeing right now with our clients, primarily because the days of I wonder is over. Now it's a security risk that needs to be solved. And now that it's like, okay, at the very least, we got to lock AI down. And what are you going to do? Like, not have anything? So, a lot of times, that's exactly what we're seeing drive this is that security requirement and that security hole.
yeah. It's and that last part, that quandary. That's the quandary of cybersecurity, right? Is I could make your business really secure. We can make sure nobody gets anything in or out, right? And that includes legitimate stuff. So you're really secure, but you're not able to operate, and that's one extreme. And so all of this becomes a matter of risk tolerance, right? At the end of the day, and cybersecurity is a business risk. It is, if you got employees, you've got HR issues, you've got work comp issues, et cetera. If you got a product, you got product liability issues. Everybody's got their own specific, every business has its own specific risks. Every business has a cybersecurity risk if they have people who access the outside world, right? Right down to your phone system. Your phone system's on the network, right? There's vulnerabilities that they use to exploit it. you've got to do a lot of things. Security is not compliance. Compliance is not security. They're two different issues. You can have both. It is that is really complicated, right? Getting to a compliance framework and staying secure, because there are some studies that show that a lot of companies that don't do it the right way end up getting very focused on managing tools and managing to a
Yep. Yep.
framework, and they forget
Yep.
about security, right? So,
Mark, I wrote a book right here on the subject. Right here. Right here. Hint,
see
hint.
it. Good plug.
I wrote a book on the subject, and in that specifically, one of the points that I make, and I think you'll agree with this, there are two different things: both the appearance of security compliance and actual security, which is
Yep.
like we were describing, configuring the environment so that remote ports aren't opening. Things that are simple. Those two things are both required because the compliance side, the appearance of security, is required in order to get insurance, to get clients, third party security audits, all these different things. You need to appear secure. It's a big deal. A lot of people don't realize that there's third party tools like BitSight and Security Score and others that we use as part of our monthly security review that we provide for our clients. But those tools are third party tools that, they are measuring you whether you know it or not, and your insurance
Yeah.
company is using those things. Clients that may be checking you out are using those things. Cyber terrorism, cyber actors are using those things. If I look at your bit score and I see you got all DKIM problems and all kind of issues, then you may be a good target. Let me look at you a little deeper. If I look at your bit score or your security score and I see good marks across, you know what? I'm gonna move on. You may be too hard for me. So these things really matter, and a lot of people don't even know they exist.
Well, they don't know that a lot of people don't realize that an attacker can go out and look and see what ports you have open on your network on a website,
Yeah.
right? Like there's websites that publish this stuff and they're not even on the dark web. So it is a real issue. And the uh, I think the important thing, I think this whole conversation, by the way, is why a lot of mid-market and smaller customers choose to bury their head in the sands, and just say, well, I've got insurance for that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, not only if you take that approach, not only do you have a cyber risk, but you have a D&O risk if you have shareholders, if you're a fiduciary. That D&O insurance exploded in price about 5 or 6 years ago because boards were being sued for negligence. You have a duty to your employees. You have a duty to sometimes your customers if you've got financial information and things like that. Certainly if you've got HIPAA and all those things. But what what I hope that we can bring, and this is really when I look at and there's a business side of this, but when I look at the mission side of this, and that is really important in cybersecurity. It's full of mission-driven people. I think most of us are very passionate about what we do, and I'm very passionate about protecting entrepreneurs. As a 30-ish year entrepreneur myself, I think it's really important, and I think
Me
this is an
too,
area.
Mark.
I think this is one that most don't understand, and what I hope that can come out of this, if somebody's out there watching this trying to figure out, like, oh my God, what do I do? We're trying to bring a simplified approach to a really complex problem, which is we can handle all this back end work. This is all complicated stuff. If you don't understand it, that's cool. Know that we do, right? And know that we've designed this to try to make it easy, to try to make very complex easy, because there's a set of tools that, when brought together and used as a solution, and that's just really important, can drive a really good outcome. And that outcome is, for a very small amount of money relative to an overall business, or relative to just, if you think about it on a per employee basis, it's nothing compared to what you spend in taxes and all the other stuff on them. For a relatively small amount of money, you can get 90% of what you need. And that last 10%, you could spend a fortune trying to get incremental gains. But if you go to the core hygienes, the EDR, the XDR, the email, the testing your users, scanning for leaks with dark web, those core fundamental things, the hygiene of cybersecurity, if you get those you put those in place, and we get to a place where we're providing you, just like you talk about, why are those ports open? Maybe a breach didn't happen, but this thing popped because you shouldn't be running that service on that part of the network, or these ports shouldn't be open. That's proactive, right? Those are the things where, hey, look, we got better today because we looked at this
Yep.
thing. And if I can
Yep.
weed out a lot of the noise for you and give you high fidelity, this thing happened, why, right? I can't tell for sure. You might know. And hopefully we look at it and say, did we tighten up the attack surface today? Like
Yep.
little by little, piece by piece. And there is hope. This doesn't have to be a losing battle. And more important than anything else, you got to have a partner that's got your back when things happen, right? Because
People
things happen
matter. People matter, man. Things
100%.
do happen, and when something happens, you need a skilled, knowledgeable professional there alongside to use these tools to get the outcomes you're talking about. So yeah, I don't think any of us are going to get replaced anytime soon. I don't really believe a lot of the hype out here with AI about replacing everyone. I think AI is a really good tool, but I think there's some human interaction needed, especially now, and I think it will be for quite a while into the future. But that's just my opinion. I think we're in a great time here, Mark, to really be grabbing hold of today's technology and using it. I love what you're bringing here with VigilAgent. I like the methodology behind it. That it's not just a tool; it's a solution, right? It is complex, but with this, it really allows professionals to use the tool to give you a managed service, so that it's not all the weight on you as a business. But at the same time, if you're a large business, especially, and you have an internal team, these are great tools, man. These are the ability for you to get in and see exactly the same thing the SOC sees. The ticketing system that's in it. There's so much richness to this solution that we haven't even touched on. But
Yep.
it's really, really, really good stuff. I'm excited about what's in the future here. Things are getting better. I really believe the things that we've talked about for years that have been difficult but doable are now becoming much more doable. AI in general, it just makes computers easier to interface with, whether you're trying to code or trying to do whatever. It's just a much, much easier interface. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's very true for this product as well.
I think that a lot of AI, again, bad guys are using AI for bad purposes. Others are using it to cut costs. We're looking at it and say, how do we make our humans better? And I think final plug I'll give from an approach perspective. A lot of people talk about cybersecurity. How do you have level threes in a world where there's probably no more level ones and maybe not level twos, right? Certainly, we we're moving towards a world very quickly where we're going to have high twos and threes, right? So when you look at that, I actually think there's that leveraging our AI will have a much more humane way of making level twos and level threes because the level one analyst job is really hard. When
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
young, you're learning, it's stressful. You're looking at a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again, and they make mistakes. And I'll be the first to tell you, we've had misses. And I said earlier on, we're in a business where they only have to be right once, and we can never be wrong. That's impossible with humans. That's absolutely positively impossible. But now using humans to manage and monitor the AI, to learn from the AI, we're able to build that skill set, have them doing useful things for our customers, proactive things, health checking environments, and audits, and red teaming, all sorts of things, without exposing both that individual and our customers to unnecessary risk. And to me, that's a better way because the machines don't miss on a lot of the low level stuff. It's just data, right? It's very, very routine. They're never subjective, they're objective. They can find very quickly these patterns and identify them. They can bring the data forth quickly, make good decisions. That's the only way you're going to be able to get to the good stuff and the complex catches and all those pieces. And I think we can do that in a better way. I think we can drive better outcomes using AI and do it in a way that's far more scalable and helps drive the cost down, not up. And that's really for everybody That's a win-win, and that is an outcome, right? Those are the types of outcomes that we want to drive: positive for our business, positive for our partners and their customers, and better security all along the way.
Yeah, Mark, you nailed it. That's really what that's what really what we're talking to our clients as we put together 2026 roadmaps and really look at closing 2025 strong here is, you know, getting technology to be able to be used to secure the environment at a discounted price from what you were spending in the past. And really, it's a combination of things. I know a lot of our clients have a tendency, as you mentioned, to go really in deeply with some very, very expensive EDR. And what we're saying is perhaps that money distributed out among a program of quite a few different things. You mentioned specifically, a cyber actor, cyber criminal only needs to be right once, right? While that is true, we try to put defense in depth in place, so they need to be right a bunch of times. Everything from canaries with early warnings when they scan to, all along the way, we put trip flags, right? We put things
Yep.
within the firewall that you mentioned specifically about, some of the information that you get within the system is not as good as it could be, but you configure that firewall correctly so that it's logging certain rules that match certain things. Now you got good intel coming into the system because it was configured right at the firewall, right? Things like geocoding and other things that we know are indicators of compromise. Again, defense in depth, right? There's a lot of strength in that. This particular tool, I think, is great. I think it's great, but it needs to be combined with a strategy,
Yep.
right? Around training people, around looking at these different tools, somebody watching these tools. The idea of just buying an EDR and letting it run and not even looking at the alerts and just kind of walking away. I don't think that's a viable option today. And I know that some businesses kind of are not sure what to do, so choose to stick their head in the sand. I think a much better call would be reach out. Put something in the comment of this. Direct messages, Valenture.com, VigilAigent. Reach out, talk to us, and I think you'll find good partners that will help you figure out what really works for your business and get you the best bang for the buck. You don't have to be the fastest to sell, right? Just don't be the slowest. That cheetah's going to be running every day. You ain't got to be out here and be the fastest, but you don't want to be the slowest. Don't put your head in the sand. There's some things that we can do now. It's more cost effective. It's better. It's easier. It's very doable nowadays. And the things that you can do with AI are not just, look at bettering your cybersecurity like we're talking about today. Absolutely. But there's also things that you can do to empower your people in the business. So look at technology. Look at your technology budget. Look at the money you're spending, right? Look at the percentage of the total dollar. What are you getting out of that? Is there really return on investment? Is it empowering the business? Is it really protecting the business? Where are you really at? You mentioned cybersecurity risk. I mean, that was really good. Thanks for sharing, Mark. A couple of my thoughts here at the end. You mentioned that cybersecurity is really just a risk exercise for the business,
For sure.
right?
Yep.
That's one of the biggest things that we do instead of a plain old pen test. Can you do a pen test? Absolutely, we'll be glad to do a pen test. But what we do in addition to a pen test is a cybersecurity risk assessment. Why do we do that? Because it matters. If something happens in your environment, what's in the environment right now matters. What they find costs you money. So wouldn't you want to know what's laying there on those machines right now that may be PII or maybe some things that may cost you money in the event of a cybersecurity risk? So we add these type things to give a dollar to the risk so that you can know, okay, this is the amount of cybersecurity risk I have by dollars. Now we can look at how insurable we are, right? So we can see what kind of insurance do we need? What do we need to do? Or maybe we just need to clean up our machines. Hello? Maybe we just need to configure our stuff. Maybe we just need to add some visibility with VigilAigent so that a combination of that approach gets us, an actual reduction in IT spending, right? It can actually cost less and be better. And
Get
a
them
lot of
off
people just
Windows
don't realize
2000,
that,
Ron. No more Windows 2000 and stuff. You'd
I'm
be
just trying
amazed
to
with
get off
legacy
XP,
apps.
Mark.
You'd be
Come on.
amazed what we see out there for operating systems. It's amazing. Customers
No,
haven't
man.
changed an application, so they can't change an
I,
OS.
I wouldn't, Mark. You know, we deal in healthcare and manufacturing and quite a few other challenging environments. And
Yep.
man, I'll tell you, there's a reason that healthcare specifically is targeted, right?
Oh yeah.
They got a lot of good
Yeah.
data, juicy stuff to
Yep.
catch. They got a lot of distributed land type stuff. It's not all SaaS. It's
Right.
like an actual place you go to, right? A clinic, a hospital. It's got all kind of equipment in there, right? That's got old machines that's running old programs that can't be updated. So it's got all kind of just holes in the environment that are incredibly difficult to plug. So you got to be smart. You need a good partner in those type of environments who can put in all the pieces like we've been talking about so that you know that you've done your due diligence. So there's no negligence. So if something does happen, right? And worst case scenario, you're standing in front of whoever it is, hopefully it's not a judge, but you know, and they answer the question, well, what did you do? Well, I brought in a professional. I did my homework. I put in these tools because, right, if you do those things, it's a good day. If you
Yep.
don't do those things, it can be a very challenging event.
Oh yeah. Hopefully, just standing in front of a mirror and knowing that you're doing the right thing for your stakeholders drives it. And the last thing I'll say is like a lot of this, a lot of what you pointed to, and a lot of why they need most companies we see need a real good partner that can do some of that sort of heavy lift consulting work, is because sometimes it's not again sometimes it's just not the technology, it's about policies and controls, right? And
Yeah.
those, if you have the right policies and controls to mitigate that risk, I say an ounce of prevention these days is worth about $4.4 million. That's what it's
The
worth.
average. Yeah.
Yep.
Way more than a pound to cure, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so true. What we bring to the table a lot of times is those little things that people don't even know they need. I mean, we've got the policies written, right? We bring them to the table, you know, a little bit of edit. You know, the solution just shortens the gap in what it takes to become mature in your cybersecurity position. That's really what it does. By bringing on a partner, doing the things that we're talking about, looking at the tools that we're talking about, all of these things, it basically just levels you up quickly instead of this long process where if it's left as just the internal team, you know, we know what the real world is. Those folks are busy. All those
Yeah.
internal teams that we deal with, man alive. I mean, extra time. They aren't just sitting around playing, you know, Xbox on the side at work, right? These folks are
Yep.
working. They're working hard. They're busy. They need an escalation partner. They need someone providing good roadmaps. They need someone who understands defense in depth. They need someone who can provide to them items that have been vetted, not just, you know, well, here's some options. No, these are the ones that we've tested. These are the ones that we work. These are the ones that we know and believe in. Those are real needs for people nowadays.
Yep. For sure.
All righty. Well, let's finish it with that, Mr. Mark. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, if you want to act on this, please reach out to me. Drop some comments in there. Ask some questions. We'll be watching this if you ask some questions after the event as well. And Mark, thank you so much. And
Thanks
you
for
have a
having me,
great
Ron.
weekend, and we will talk to you later, man.
You too. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.